Hey, I don't talk about it as much as my love for animation, but I watch a ton of live-action shows. I pretty much always have one that I'm going through. When left to my own personal preference, I tend to choose shows that have a comedic tilt but retain dramatic weight. To this effect, some of my favorite live-action shows are Scrubs, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Abbott Elementary, The Good Place, Shrinking, and Insecure. However, I also have invested in watching many of the most popular and well-loved shows on television. I watched Breaking Bad as it was airing, I've seen every episode of Grey's Anatomy, Mad Men, Sex and the City, Friends, Gilmore Girls, Severance, Euphoria, Skins. I've always been curious to find out what actually lies in the pages of those stories that the populace loves so much. Some of them have been amazing experiences, while others have failed to live up to the hype. This week, while making dinner, I was ruminating on my time watching Mad Men. While I think the show is objectively very good, with solid writing, acting, and production value throughout, I reached a point where I found it difficult to tolerate the sheer misery of every character in the show anymore. And I started wondering how much characters have to suffer for a show to be good. See, Don's storyline in Mad Men, from my view, is essentially about nothing ever being enough. His entire life, he claws at what's next, leaving behind family, work, and love for ritzier and shinier things with seemingly no sense of loyalty. He constantly pretends the past doesn't exist and reaches for new ideals of who Don Draper should be, and each reset of his life works for a shorter time as he runs away from himself. I guess you could say the same for multiple characters in the show. They trap themselves in the same patterns over and over again, guaranteeing their own suffering. And while there's definitely a lesson and a coherent theme there, watching the characters repeat their patterns over and over again became joyless for me as a viewer after so many seasons. And there are multiple shows where I've felt that to be true. Another glaring example is Grey's Anatomy, though the writing truly pales in comparison to Mad Men. The series has run for 22 seasons so far, and it entirely depends on the misery of its characters to keep the story moving. What was originally a series balancing complex patient cases with the doctor's interpersonal relationships has devolved into an incestuous sex marathon with impersonal, forced, and recycled patient cases peppered in so they can pretend it's still a show about doctors. No couple on the show is ever allowed to end happy because the roller coaster brings people back, until it doesn't. Meredith Grey, the titular character, is undeniably one of the most suffered characters in TV history, experiencing the death of multiple family members and romantic partners and almost dying herself multiple times, and even describing herself from the very beginning as dark and twisty. Capitalizing on the misery of these characters has entirely trashed numerous character arcs, and ultimately over the years alienated what was once a huge and loyal fan base. Most Grey's Anatomy fans, whether or not they're still watching, acknowledge that the show stopped being good at least 12 seasons ago. And then there's Euphoria. The series has been notorious throughout its run, and while one might more easily say that there was some artistic merit in the last 2 seasons, the currently running season 3 has been difficult to sit through. And the acting from the leads has still been fantastic, so I place this entirely on the writers. In an attempt to be gritty, edgy, and no holds barred, the show has become yet another slog of each character being as miserable as possible. Not a single character has realized their potential in the slightest, and while that's clearly a purposeful direction for the series, it is not enjoyable to invest in these characters anymore as a viewer. The emotional center of Euphoria has always been its female characters, and the writing for each one has been progressively misogynistic, now past the point at which you could wave it away by saying Sam Levinson is making a statement. They're not just suffering, the show is framing their suffering as spectacle, punishment for their desires, or an inevitability of their sexuality. It's reductive. There's Rue, the former addict, whose best case scenario is being the assistant to a drug trafficking pimp. Viewers were made to root for her, as the show is told through her narration, but she becomes progressively irredeemable as the series goes on. At this point, she's assisted in murder. There's Cassie, the woman who desired male validation and superficial luxury so deeply that she went through with a marriage to a manipulative, scamming weasel of a man for appearances, fuck Nate Jacobs, and when he can't provide for her, she becomes an OF model. Cassie's character between season 1 and 3 are completely different people. Her character has been assassinated. Who was once the most layered in the series is now a self-identifying bimbo. And then there's Maddie, the baddie who was often a voice of reason, who escaped an abusive relationship and grew up to be a manager for Instagram models, including her former best friend who she's now pimping out. I'm curious to see what her motives are as the season ends. There's Jules, who has throughout the series been subjected to fetishization and flanderization as a trans woman, amounting to her dropping out of art school to become a sugar baby, and recently unreasonably painting a phallic picnic for a $100,000 gig, and then throwing a fit and trashing the set in red paint when it doesn't get approved to be on network television. The actress Hunter Schafer herself is not pleased with Jules' direction in the series. The show continuously funnels its women into the same narrow set of sexualized fates, and it doesn't treat those situations with dignity. The only female character who isn't is Lexi, and one might wonder if the actress's status as a nepo baby has prevented her character from meeting a similar fate. It's not a great look. I don't think this season's story is entirely pointless. I can see what the story is trying to say so far. To me, it seems like most of these characters peaked in high school, and lots of people in the real world go down these life paths. Their choices as young people domino into bad situations. Women who base everything they do so heavily on male validation can end up at the mercy of it their entire lives. Young people who chase drugs to run away from reality can end up dead or in dangerous situations. And being a male manipulator will catch up to you eventually. But the messages Euphoria is trying to tell are not complicated, interesting, creative, or nuanced. The show isn't just bleak, it's repetitive in imagining its characters' futures as humiliation, sexual commodification, failure, and desperation. The series' glamorized neon glittery aesthetics stolen from Petra Collins in the first season set the tone as something sensationalized. And even with the aesthetic changes now, the icky exploitative feeling remains. There are still a few episodes left at the time of me writing this, so maybe Sam Levinson will prove me wrong and tie up everybody's stories with respect. And if so, you guys are welcome to chew me out in the comments. In contrast with Euphoria, we can look at one of its clearest inspirations, Skins, the UK version. The first 4 seasons of Skins all encompass one continuous set of characters, and it is by far one of the most impactful series I have watched. I was deeply invested in each character and devastated by their losses and failures. Skins also uses misery as a storytelling tool. All the characters are British high schoolers with various issues a high schooler might face: bad home life, disordered eating, depression, romance, recreational drug use. In fact, on paper, the bird's eye view resembles Euphoria. But Skins doesn't sensationalize and exploit its characters. It gives you an honest, understated, and unfiltered look into their world, and they feel like real people. One of the most striking examples of this is Cassie Ainsworth. Yes, another blonde Cassie. Her friends and her boyfriend Sid find her to be an enigma, but the viewer gets clear insight into her psyche. Her story is a quietly heartbreaking tale of her interior pain as she struggles with an eating disorder. She suffers no melodrama. Her misery is told through quiet moments of avoiding food, sitting in silence, and seeming to want to disappear. She avoids addressing her issues, dissociates, tries to erase herself. It doesn't feel like the show or the writers are punishing her character or assigning morality to her, but sitting with her and respecting her struggle. And then there's Freddie McClair, one of the saddest characters I've ever witnessed. We meet him as a quiet guy grieving his mother, who then becomes someone others lean on because he seems like he can handle it as the one who tries to project steadiness. But the burden laid upon him is simply too much for a teenage boy to handle on his own. As his rivalry-turned friendship with Cook fractures and his relationship with Effie deepens, Freddie ends up trying to carry more of her instability than any teenage boy realistically could, and he sacrifices his own needs to try to help those around him. And he deteriorates quietly as he gives himself away and becomes exhausted, isolated, and more willing to tolerate pain, believing it's the cost of love. And when Freddie's story reaches its sudden and irreversible endpoint, it doesn't feel like exploitation. It feels like the cost of the most gentle person in the story carrying a burden too big in a world that wouldn't let him be a kid. And because the show doesn't desensitize you with 1,000 traumas before this happens, what happens to Freddie actually impacts you. So, there's 4 shows that use misery as a tool for storytelling. What makes it successful? I think misery is effective when it reveals character details to us and drives change. But it quickly becomes exhausting when writers and directors use it as repetitive spectacle that replaces actual character growth. Euphoria and Grey's Anatomy unempathetically exploit their characters' suffering in life situations and romantic relationships for roller coaster drama that keeps viewers hooked, without allowing for real character growth. And the end result is an unsatisfied and disappointed fanbase. Skins, in contrast, lets misery coexist with simple, quiet moments, tenderness, and vulnerability, making the pain feel embedded in the fabric of their lives instead of only showing us a low-light reel. The misery is written with respect and restraint, not moralized. And I think Mad Men sits somewhere in the middle. For the first few seasons of that show, I really felt for those characters, and the show rode the line well, but as it went on, the repetition had diminishing returns and left me unsatisfied as a viewer, transferring the misery onto me. I'm not trying to say that any show in this video is bad, or without artistic value. I've watched all 4 of them enough to talk about them. If I had to rank them in terms of being objectively good, I'd go Skins, Mad Men, the first 10 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and then Euphoria at the bottom. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts in the comments. I just ask that you keep it respectful so that we can have a dialogue. This is a bit of a different format from what I usually write. I don't typically combine multiple shows for one video, and y'all haven't heard me talk much about live action in general, but I wanted to give it a try. This was also my first time editing like this, and I'll probably be using this style for a little while until I can try out Facecam later this year. Let me know what you think about it. Thank you very much for watching. Stay hydrated, tell your friends you love them, and I'll see you soon.